Because I prioritize my work over household chores. My mother-in-law criticizes me, saying, "Don't use your work as an excuse to avoid doing household chores." My husband said, "This is my house, so you should be the one to leave," and he did not oppose filing for divorce. Furthermore, my husband refused to express his feelings in words. Even when I asked him again, "Are you really okay with this?" he did not give me a satisfactory answer. I believed I was supporting my husband. My name is Emma Adams, and I am 35 years old. I work for an IT company. And soon, I will be celebrating my first anniversary with my husband, Jamie, who is 3 years younger than me and a colleague at work. We met through our common friend. Initially, I was not interested in younger men, but I was drawn to Jamie because he made an effort for me, and I decided to date him. It did not take a year from dating to marriage, and I felt very happy knowing how deeply he thought of me. After marriage, at Jamie's request, we started a new life in a newly built condominium in New York City. Both of us were working, so we decided to do household chores together, but Jamie, having lived at his parents' home for a long time, had never even washed dishes. At first, I taught him while doing chores together, but gradually, Jamie stopped doing any chores at all. Perhaps because our dating period was short, Jamie's negative aspects began to appear one after another after marriage. Although we work for the same company, we are in different departments. Jamie's department is relatively peaceful, and he comes home earlier than I do. Even though I asked him to at least prepare dinner with store-bought items, when I come home, Jamie leaves his clothes scattered around and is engrossed in gaming while lying on the sofa. Honestly, when I come home tired and see this scene, I can only sigh. Jamie just laughs off my words, and the situation does not change at all. I am already feeling serious anxiety about my married life with Jamie. Yet, there is someone who causes me more trouble than Jamie. That is Jamie's mother, my mother-in-law. She was silent at first, but as soon as we filed our marriage registration, her true character showed. She adores Jamie and visits our house whenever she has free time. My mother-in-law lives in the neighboring state, and I think it is hard for her to visit. But Jamie is paying for her travel expenses. Every weekend she comes and complains about my way of doing household chores. I want to relax at least on weekends, but it seems that the concept of consideration does not exist for my mother-in-law. What she always says is, "It's unfortunate for Jamie to have an older wife. I am only 3 years older than him, and I do not see it as a problem." Nevertheless, for my mother-in-law, it seems to be material to demean me. Moreover, she absolutely believes in Jamie's excellence. It may be natural for a mother to be proud of her son, but her excessive attachment to Jamie is somewhat abnormal. I feel this is Jamie's responsibility as well. Because he tends to exaggerate his stories a bit, perhaps out of insecurity, he doesn't care if it bothers others. Even if I point this out, he argues back saying he wants to please his mother, and I cannot respond strongly. However, as a result, my mother-in-law has come to believe even more that Jamie is excellent. She often praises our condominium, saying, "Living in such a wonderful place is fantastic. The interior is modern and stylish because it is new." That's right. I'm a bit troubled because my friends are jealous, Jamie says. My mother-in-law listens intently to this story, looks at me, and sighs exaggeratedly, saying, "Why did Jamie marry such a person?" She always says Jamie could have hoped for a younger and more attractive partner, and urges me to be thankful for the good life Jamie has provided. Jamie only gently pacifies his mother, and she seems to see me as a pitiful older woman dependent on Jamie. Despite my desire not to start a conflict in our new marriage, I have ignored my mother-in-law's words. However, Jamie has gradually become more arrogant and, conspiring with his mother, has increased his contemptuous behavior towards me. Moreover, without consulting me, he started preparing a room for his mother to stay, suggesting an unused room for her. When I couldn't stand it anymore and confronted Jamie, he shouted, "Be quiet. I am the master of this house," and completely rejected my opinion. One day, Jamie made a huge mistake at work, angering a client to the extent that they decided to cut off all future dealings with him. Losing this deal would be a significant loss for the company. To visit the client early the next morning, I had to prepare for a few days' stay away from home, so I decided to go back to my house immediately. Jamie was already at home but avoided making eye contact with me. Meanwhile, as usual, my mother-in-law spoke to me while I was packing. I briefly explained that I would not be home for 2 or 3 days because of a business trip, to which she retorted, "You are being so arrogant. Are you really going on a business trip? Aren't you just going out to have fun?" I didn't have the energy to deal with her, but her words did make me a little angry. When I asked, "Hasn't Jamie told you anything?" Jamie stiffened in surprise. He probably only told his mother what suited him, as usual. Who do you think is to blame for my situation? Jamie gave me a signal as if not to let his mother find out. I was fed up and continued packing, ignoring my mother-in-law. She probably didn't like that attitude. Because I prioritize work over home life, my mother-in-law criticizes me, saying, "Don't use work as an excuse to avoid doing household chores." Since getting married, I have tried to balance work and home responsibilities. In fact, it was Jamie who promised to share the household duties. Yet, he has not helped at all since we got married. Why am I the only one being blamed? Even when I protest, I am loudly scolded. Don't complain about living a luxurious life with the money Jamie earns, and eventually, I was told to leave the house. Even though I was told to leave, this is my house. But such a daughter-in-law is not part of the family. Divorce Jamie and leave, I was told. I am just astonished by my mother-in-law's one-sided claims and cannot argue back. Jamie just stays silent and says nothing. Jamie, your mother says this, but what do you think? I asked. Deep down, I had a little hope in Jamie. However, Jamie's true feelings were different from my expectations. Yeah, Mom says so too, and I've been thinking we don't get along, he answered and pulled out an already completed divorce form. Then he said, "This is my house, so you should be the one to leave." He told me that, initially he didn't want to date me, and he reluctantly married me, fearing I would do something awful if we broke up. Hearing this, my anger welled up, but in that moment, my love for Jamie completely vanished. Alright, let's get divorced. I'll come back for my things later. At that, my mother-in-law looked triumphant. I could no longer stand to breathe the same air with them. But there was one thing I needed to confirm. Is Jamie planning to stay in this house? Jamie looked surprised. Then he said, "That's what I'm thinking," and as if he had an epiphany, he continued, "I see, you don't want a divorce. But it's already decided. As a peaceful divorce, he stated there would be no compensation." I couldn't help but feel a dissonance with Jamie's remarks. I acknowledged, packed my things again, and left the house with the divorce form Jamie had given me. The next day, I filed the divorce papers at my business trip location and reported it to Jamie via email, to which he replied, "Understood. Keep up the good work." While reading that message, I was already considering other matters. I was relieved that I managed to negotiate well with the client and overcome the company's crisis. About a month after separating from Jamie, he and his mother suddenly appeared at the company where I work. "Call Emma immediately," his mother demanded loudly at the reception, and I guided them to the meeting room with a bad feeling. Then, I received a one-sided accusation that she had been kicked out of the condominium. I could not sympathize with that claim. It was me who was kicked out, and Jamie and his mother were the one who kept living in that condominium. When I argued back, Jamie started talking in a flustered manner. "Why didn't you tell me the rent was $10,000? Because of you, I've been utterly embarrassed." It seems that Jamie and his mother were questioned by the condominium's owner because they couldn't pay the rent. "Can't believe it. Didn't you even grasp how much the rent was?" I asked, and Jamie's face turned red. "I thought it would be about $1,000 a month to live there," he explained. Jamie had misunderstood that one could live in a luxury condominium in the city center for such a cheap price. How ignorant he was. It seems he hadn't even tried to do a little research, which would have made this clear immediately. Maybe he finally understood why he was so envied. However, unable to escape the sense of superiority he had gained and not wanting to be driven out of the condominium, Jamie demanded, "Even though we're divorced, we're still husband and wife, so you should continue to pay the rent." I couldn't comprehend what he was saying and let out a strange sound. His mother also, as if supporting Jamie's claim, said, "Yes, spouses support each other. Since Jamie is in trouble, you should help him. Once divorced, we are complete strangers. Their future has nothing to do with me. His mother has her own home where she originally lived, so she should return there." However, thinking she could live with her son, she had already given up her house. Jamie argued, "If I can't live there, I won't be able to brag to others," and lamented that he would be pitied for being laughed at. "That's why you should earn your own money and pay the rent," I responded, but it was useless to explain anything to Jamie. It's truly troublesome that he would even come to my workplace. I was surprised to hear, "Emma, isn't your salary a bit higher than Jamie's? You should have just said so," his mother said dismissively. At his mother's a bit, I couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. Even now, Jamie was still putting on airs to his mother. As I laughed, his mother became angry. However, I ignored her and told the truth. "It's not just a little. My income is dozens of times higher than Jamie's. His mother seemed utterly unable to comprehend what I was saying. For her, it was an unexpected story, and she scoffed at me as if I was foolish. She couldn't imagine that her precious son, whom she had praised so much, earned less than me. During our marriage, I paid for most of our living expenses, but I thought it might hurt Jamie's pride to speak the truth, so I used to nod along with Jamie and let his mother's words pass. However, one should be able to realize that it's unrealistic to live in a condominium that costs $10,000 a month if they thought about it a bit. Yet his mother refused to believe anything I said. "Mom, it seems Emma is regretting things too. Maybe we can start over?" Jamie proposed to his mother. She said, well, pretending to think a bit, and then stated that she would be willing to return if I continued to pay the condominium's rent as before. It appears they really want to live in that condominium. Realizing that he would have to cover his mother's expenses as well because I had been paying most of the living costs, Jamie probably felt I was just a wallet to them. Exhausted by their blatantly obvious intentions, I took a moment before telling Jamie that I needed to speak with him. Jamie looked eerily pleased, as if imagining what was about to happen. Then, I handed him a piece of paper. The document was marked Contract Termination Notice. Both Jamie and his mother were shocked, their eyes wide. I completely ignored them and informed them that the contract would be terminated this month. Jamie turned pale, trembling as he stared at the document. "Termination of the contract? What are you talking about? You don't have that authority." His mother screamed incredulously. "Why? Because I am actually the president of the company." His mother lost her words, realizing the truth. Before we got married, I had heard that Jamie was working at a large corporation, but after we got married, it became clear that he was actually a temporary employee. And since his contract was ending at the end of that month, I decided to bring him into my company. Fortunately, my company was busy and in need of help. Jamie, who liked to boast, had told his mother that he was scouted by my current company. He didn't want to disappoint his mother and asked me to keep it a secret that I was the president and that he was working at my company. I also wanted to avoid any trouble, so I went along with his story and didn't respond to anything his mother said. Since we started working together, I kept our marital relationship a secret at the company to avoid mixing personal and professional life. Therefore, only a few people in the company knew that Jamie was my husband. However, his work performance was poor, and I was constantly dealing with complaints from colleagues. Despite his tasks not being particularly complicated, he frequently made mistakes and often arrived late or was absent without notice. Since we commute separately, even as a cohabitant, I hadn't noticed this. However, despite being severely reprimanded by a superior for a recent mistake, Jamie incredulously resisted and showed no signs of remorse, insisting he was not at fault. Certainly, I could understand Jamie's attitude if the fault lay with someone else. But in this case, it was clearly his own fault. From the beginning, I had hired Jamie not as a permanent employee, but on a renewable contract basis. This policy was applied equally to all employees, and I could not make an exception just for Jamie. He had his grievances but followed the company's policies. Now, as the time for contract renewal approached, it presented a perfect opportunity to terminate his contract. Upon learning this truth, his mother was shocked, and Jamie was sweating bullets, lost for words. His mother had accused me of being a liar, but when I showed her my business card, she finally acknowledged that I was indeed an entrepreneur. Thinking there was nothing more to discuss with them, I urged them to leave the room. "You are suitable as my daughter-in-law," his mother suddenly declared, straightening her back and looking me in the eye. I was taken aback and lost for words. When I questioned her, she said there was no objection to me being an excellent president and a spouse for her outstanding son. She revealed that her interference was meant to test my character and that she had accepted me from the beginning. I was completely dumbfounded by this sudden change in her attitude, and rather than feeling upset, I found it refreshing. Jamie agreed with his mother's opinion and tried to persuade me not to be so stubborn. He had interpreted my decision to terminate the contract as a way to get his attention. Moreover, while they wanted me to continue working, they started planning for Jamie to take over the household chores. I was completely astounded by the leap in their conversation. When I stated that I was not interested in repairing our relationship, "What are you talking about? What's wrong with Jamie?" she retorted. Had she forgotten that Jamie had lost his job? Moreover, it was clear that being with Jamie would only lead to difficulties. For me, the relationship with Jamie was nothing but a disadvantage, and I no longer felt any attraction towards him. I wondered how to make them understand. If I had to force them out, there was a risk they might cause trouble at the company again. While I was pondering, "Why do you need to think so much?" I'm saying we will forgive you." His mother couldn't help but make an even more outrageous statement. As I sighed and argued back that I was not in a position to beg for forgiveness, Jamie furiously shouted, "Filing for divorce on your own is against the law." However, it was Jamie himself who had initiated the divorce, and it was done with mutual consent. His selfishness was astounding. "I'm fed up. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore," I stated clearly. "Even if we become unhappy, you don't care?" They counted. "I don't," I affirmed, and they started breaking things in the room while calling me a demon. At that moment, a security guard, noticing the loud noise, rushed in and they were expelled from the room. The situation had deteriorated significantly, and eventually, we had to call the police, and they were taken away for causing a disturbance. Since then, we have communicated only through lawyers, and I have not seen them since. After losing their jobs and home, they decided to move to the countryside to live with a distant relative. However, Jamie struggled to find a job, and the job he finally got involved mostly manual labor, which he found difficult. I received a call from his mother just once, asking for a division of property due to financial difficulties. But as my marriage to Jamie lasted less than a year, there was effectively no shared property to speak of. Even after explaining this, his mother did not understand and kept asking for help repeatedly, but I warned her that if there were any further nuisances, I would counterclaim for damages. After that, the contacts ceased. Through these series of events, I have deeply reflected on my poor judgment in men. I must admit that I have always been drawn to inappropriate partners. Yet, I still harbored a glimmer of hope for Jamie. Perhaps he had been eyeing my financial status from the beginning, but I hadn't realized even that fact. I have decided to keep my distance from men for a while and have chosen to adopt a cat in my new home. I had previously given up on having a cat due to his mother's allergies, but now I no longer need to restrain myself. I have resolved to live a life just for myself from now on. "Get out of here." John's words shocked me. I stood frozen in surprise, my mouth agape, wordless. It seems they do not understand their position. They better brace themselves. There's no other way but to make them understand my position. The moment I resolved myself, a wry smile appeared on my face. "My name is Wendy Smith. I am a 52-year-old full-time employee at a certain food manufacturing company. Being a full-time employee at this age often leads to the misunderstanding that I am single. However, I am not single. I married John in my 20s, and soon after, we had our son, Matt. Matt has since become independent and is married. Currently, I live happily with John and my mother-in-law, Diane, just the three of us. But it's not without its problems. Diane has aged, and her legs have grown significantly weaker. There are often times when I need to support her. However, John tends to ignore his mother's condition. She's your mother. Don't you think about helping? When I asked, John turned his face away. I wish he would be more considerate of the family. Especially lately, I've felt this way more frequently. John works as a graphic designer, currently freelance, but he used to work in the creative department of an advertising agency. That's where we met, when he came to my company on business. Do you have any questions? John asked me. This part is a bit. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be commenting as an amateur. No, advertising isn't just for professionals. Your opinion is valuable. John kindly replied. He was a warm-hearted person. That was my first impression of John. After some business interactions, John proposed we start dating, which, needless to say, led to marriage. However, about 10 years after our marriage, John mentioned he wanted to quit his job and start his own business. Can you really make a living on your own? I continued working after our marriage, so we had a comfortable life. But our son, Matt, was already in upper elementary school at this time. While there were no issues currently, we anticipated future expenses like tutoring. Plus, we had to consider the possibility of neither John or I being able to work in the future. For these reasons, I couldn't agree with John giving up his stable situation. This led me to question him. I can still get work from my current workplace, so don't worry. You work from home too, right? Huh? Work from home? You used to go to the office, but now you work from home, right? Indeed. I had transitioned to telework after getting married, primarily to ensure I had time at home and to prioritize household chores. There was a vacancy for the company's online store operations, which suited me perfectly. Thus, I decided to continue teleworking. However, John seemed to misunderstand that I had quit my job to do a side business at home. That's not a side business. It's just my job being done from home. No need to exaggerate. Whether it's a side job or not, it's still proper work. No matter how many times I explained, John wouldn't accept it. As a result, our conversation ended without resolving his misunderstanding. We had several discussions afterwards, but John never changed his stance. In the meantime, John quit his job and started his own business. I couldn't hide my anxiety, but contrary to my fears, John's business was doing well. He looked happier and more relaxed than before. It seems to be going well. Yeah, I get work through connections from my previous job, and I can spend weekends with Matt, so it's really good. That's great. I felt relieved. However, a few years later, a new problem arose, which I brought up to John. Putting Mom in a nursing home? Yes, your mother herself wants it. She's become less mobile and wants to be admitted. What do you mean? John's interrogative tone left me speechless. I do want to take care of my mother-in-law. However, with both housework and my job, it's not that simple. Moreover, Matt is in middle school, facing high school entrance exams. With the need for support in various areas, I can't focus solely on my mother-in-law. After explaining these circumstances to John, he became visibly angry and vented his frustration. So, you plan to abandon my mother? It's not like that, but your mother herself. But that's what it comes down to, isn't it? If it's too hard, you could just quit your side job. I was at a loss for words to John's remark. In reality, our household's financial situation depends on my income. John contributes, but it's a small amount. If I quit my job, we wouldn't be able to make ends meet. However, I couldn't convey this reality to John. He has a high pride, and knowing I am the main breadwinner might upset him like a child. It could lead to divorce, and in the worst case, he might leave the house. In that case, I wouldn't be able to take care of Matt and my mother-in-law alone. So, I remained silent. This silence marked the end of the discussion. Even if we didn't send my mother-in-law to a nursing home, my burden wouldn't increase. Indeed, her mobility has declined, but she can still manage most of her daily life on her own, and there are few situations where she needs my help. If she can sit in a chair, she can even cook. Therefore, having my mother-in-law at home to help with household tasks was actually more helpful for me. As time went by, Matt graduated from high school and moved out for college. My burden was significantly reduced, and gradually, I could pay more attention to my mother-in-law. One holiday, we planned to go shopping at her request. I asked John to drive us. Hey, could you drive us? I'm going shopping with your mother. Sorry, I have work today, John said, dressed in a suit, but something felt off. What's with the suit? Oh, this. I got it new. It was a bit expensive, but it's important to look the part as the owner, John explained. I understood his reasoning, but it had been quite some time since he started his business. It made me wonder. I recalled an internet article suggesting that sudden changes in attire could be a sign of infidelity. Yet, there was no concrete evidence. Reluctantly, after seeing John off, I went out with my mother-in-law in a taxi, but couldn't stop thinking about John all day. Was he really having an affair? Since then, I've had my doubts about John. I thought about confronting him directly when the opportunity arose. Days passed without him showing any suspicious behavior. Time simply flowed on. Eventually, Matt informed us of his employment and later his marriage. Despite this, I couldn't find any solid proof of John's infidelity. I can't find evidence of infidelity, but now that Matt has his own family, maybe it wouldn't be a problem if we divorced. Just when I was contemplating this, my mother-in-law injured her leg going to the bathroom at night. Fortunately, the injury wasn't severe, but she was quite shaken and suddenly brought up this topic. I've decided to go to a nursing home after all, and I have a request for you. The situation was completely different from before. If I chose divorce, my mother-in-law could be left alone. This thought made me unable to refuse her request. I decided to act according to her wishes. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've been visiting my mother-in-law every weekend. After all, I'm concerned about your mother and can't bring myself to think about divorce. Muttering to myself, I returned home. I'm back. Mom, welcome back, Matt said. His wife, Sarah, was also there. We've been waiting for you, Mother. Why are Matt and his family here? Wondering, I asked Matt. Matt, why are you here? Well, just as Matt was about to answer, John appeared from behind and said to me, "You're so heartless. I've considered divorcing you and called everyone here." What do you mean? It's about Mom. You haven't fulfilled your duties as a wife. John raised his voice. I trembled in shock. But your mother. Before I could argue, John interrupted. No excuses. From now on, you're moving out, and Matt's family will live here. Stunned by his declaration, Sarah added insult to injury by yelling at me. Yeah, disappear quickly. Annoying parasite. I was dumbfounded, unable to form a response. I felt an impulsive need to argue back. So, it was true. My feelings were not accepted. John didn't care about me at all. That's why he could say such things with ease. Why did I endure all this? Without much thought, I realized I should have divorced sooner to avoid this humiliation. It was too much. I had to show them my worth by any means necessary. With a bitter smile, I said, "Understood. I'll leave." I declared this and left the room, glancing sideways at them. I went straight to my room, grabbing only a change of clothes and my work laptop, along with my bank book and a few valuables. I packed the essentials in a travel bag. Are you really planning to divorce? Yes, I am, I replied, picking up my luggage. After a moment of contemplation, I proposed to John. I've decided. We'll divorce amicably for $10,000. If that's unacceptable, I'll hire a lawyer and deal with it thoroughly. It might be modest for adultery compensation. However, I didn't have the energy to fight with John at this point. So, I deliberately offered terms favorable to John. Why should I pay compensation? Because you're the one who brought up divorce. But I stared at John as he hesitated. Smiling, I said, "Then, shall we go through a lawyer? If adultery is discovered, it won't end with just $10,000. What? At least $30,000. If you're innocent, that should be fine, right?" It was clear what choice John would make. It was a strategy that risked everything. Seeing John grit his teeth in anger, I was internally convinced. He must have been unfaithful, but I couldn't obtain proof. Therefore, I decided to bluff as if I had evidence to pressure John. What will it be? If we go to a lawyer, I'll also demand compensation from your affair partner. I don't want to cause unnecessary worry for your mother. I'd rather not escalate the issue, but faced with these words, John reluctantly replied, "Fine. I'll pay $10,000 within this week. That's fine. I'll come back on the weekend and then we can, settle the divorce papers." Saying this, I slipped past John with a smile and left the house. Afterward, I headed to a nearby cafe to start looking for a new place to live. My options were limited to a short-stay apartment. Guess I'll settle for this for now. Reluctantly renting a short-stay apartment, I decided to stay there for the time being. On the promised weekend, I went to my in-laws' house where John was. When I rang the doorbell, Sarah appeared. "Oh, what brings you here?" "Just here to pick up some things. And to take things like the divorce papers." "I see." Sarah's dismissive attitude was evident. I couldn't understand why Matt married someone like her. Entering the house, John was waiting with an envelope on the table. "Here's the divorce paper. The compensation is also enclosed." "Understood." Inside the envelope were the signed divorce papers and a bundle of $10,000, which I put in my bag. "I'll leave the moving of my room's items to a mover. Do whatever you want." John was clearly in a bad mood, despite being the one who suggested divorce. I couldn't understand why he was dissatisfied. Shaking my head, I proceeded with the moving preparations. When all was done, I handed John a bank book. This is the account book for depositing living expenses. I've been doing it until now, but from now on, please make sure to deposit it directly. I get it. John almost snatched the bank book from my hands, acting like a child. I sighed internally and headed to where Matt and Sarah were in the living room. I have something to tell you. I don't have anything to say to you, though. Here, take this. When I took out the bank book, Sarah's attitude changed instantly. What? Are you giving us money? No, that's not it. This is the account book for living expenses. Oh, is that so? Sarah's disappointment was palpable. Matt will deposit the living expenses there for you to use. So tedious. Annoying. Sarah muttered under her breath. Pretending not to hear, I told her, the management of living expenses for John and the rest of the family will now be your responsibility. Understand? Yes, I got it. Sarah responded without much enthusiasm. I left there with a sigh. After handing over the account book for living expenses and obtaining the divorce papers, my connection with John and his family was severed. I felt a sense of relief. A few days after that exchange, while I was working in my room, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. Who could it be? At such a busy time. I sighed and checked the screen to see it was Matt calling. Isn't it his work hours? It was just past 10 a.m. There was still time until lunch break, so it might be an emergency. With that thought, I pressed the answer button. Hello, Matt? Is something wrong? Hey, Mom, where are you? I'm at home. What's up? I asked, only to be met with an unexpectedly loud response from Matt. The account is empty. What's going on? Surprised by the volume, I momentarily pulled the phone away from my ear. Putting it back, I asked, are you talking about the account I set up for living expenses? Obviously. Why is the account empty? We can't make ends meet like this. Indeed, that was the case. I deliberately left the account empty. The contents were from my income, and I felt no obligation to leave anything for them. Thinking this, I asked Matt, haven't you deposited any living expenses yet? Matt struggled to find words in response. Something was off. What was happening? I asked again for confirmation. So, you haven't deposited any living expenses, have you? That's right. I thought you would take care of it. Why would you think that? We no longer share the same life, I pointed out. Matt fell silent at my words. I continued, I should have made it clear to Sarah as well. You were supposed to deposit money for your own living expenses. You did say that, but what's so difficult about contributing your earnings to the family? At that moment, Matt whispered, I got laid off. What? Say that again? I lost my job. I have no salary. I raised my voice. What? You got fired? That's right. The truth is, he started explaining why he had returned home. Matt spoke about the events that led to his return home just before it happened. He had made a significant mistake at work. Normally, a mere mistake wouldn't lead to dismissal. However, it seemed Matt tried to blame his subordinate for the failure. Revealing the mistake would mean losing a chance for promotion and facing a salary cut, a blow to his pride. Driven by selfish motives, he attempted to shift the blame. But his actions were quickly discovered, leading to his inevitable resignation. What about severance pay or unemployment benefits? Can't you live off those? There's nothing left. I've used it all up. After losing his job, Matt had been dipping into his savings to scrape by. He mentioned that living on unemployment benefits made life easier than expected. He should have found a new job during that period. But Matt took no action, overconfident in his abilities. Believing he could find a job anytime, he spent his days playing around with Sarah instead. By the time he seriously started looking for a job, he was rejected everywhere. In this dire situation, John's offer to move in came. I was planning to live off Dad's money. But upon arriving, Dad firmly said he had no money. That's unfortunate. Mom, could you just deposit this month's living expenses in the account? Matt pleaded. I replied, "You're joking, aren't you? This is not joke. I'm serious." "Well, if this is not a joke, it's payback then. You all kicked me out, remember?" My firm words silenced Matt for a moment. However, he quickly retorted, "It was Sarah and Dad who kicked you out. I had nothing to do with it. You did nothing to stop it. Reflect on that. Goodbye." After ending the call, I set my phone to block his number. Hopefully, this would make them reconsider. Smiling, I waited for any contact from the other two, but received nothing from Sarah. About a month has passed since my separation from John. I might get some contact from John. Glancing at the calendar, I realized it's the end of the month. Perhaps I might hear from him today. Holding on to that expectation, my smartphone alerted me to a new email. It's here. The sender was John calling for a gathering. Fortunately, it was Sunday, and I had no plans. With anticipation, I headed to the designated meeting place, guessing what John might propose. I was curious about how he would react when he knew everything. Upon arriving at the designated cafe, John was already there. "Sorry for being late." I greeted him with a smile and took a seat opposite him. Next to him sat Sarah. She looked displeased as I examined her. "Don't stare at me like that." "Sorry, but what's the reason for all of us to be here?" "It's about an important discussion related to our household's financial situation." Sarah frowned and was clearly upset. "That's bound to be the reason, I suppose." I thought to myself, looking at John. He started to speak hesitantly. "Actually, we got a call from the real estate management company." "Do you know anything about it?" "Real estate management company? What about them?" As I posed the question, Sarah looked at me angrily. Pointing at me, she raised her voice. "You must know something. Be honest, even if you say that." I pretended to be confused. John leaned forward. "The real estate company mentioned something about rent, but we own our house." "That's true." When I told them it must be a mistake, they even brought up suing us, John said, tapping the table with his finger, his anger evident. Seeing his frustration, I decided to reveal the truth. "Did you actually deposit the living expenses?" Yes, I did." "That's a lie. If you had, we wouldn't be in this situation." I counted, and John's face showed surprise. Smiling, I shared the truth. "The rent in question is for the family home. It should have been paid from the account I gave you." "Wait a minute. We own our own home. There's no need to pay any rent." "Well, the truth is, your mother sold the house, so your family no longer owns it," I explained. John and Sarah looked puzzled by my explanation. I then began to detail the whole story. A while back, when the decision was made for my mother-in-law to move into a nursing home, there was one obstacle. Although her pension could cover the monthly payments, she couldn't afford the lump sum required for admission. I suggested a lease-back option to her. With this approach, she could remain in her familiar home while securing the necessary funds. However, this meant that regular lease payments would become necessary. So, I decided to allocate the $500 you were supposed to contribute monthly to the household for this payment. What about the living expenses then? I was covering those entirely, which amounted to $2,000 a month. John and Sarah were visibly shocked. If you had properly provided for living expenses, it would have just been deducted for the payment. But once you understand, please make the transfer promptly and continue to do so in the future. Okay? As I smiled, John began to panic. Sensing something was off, John finally confessed his true situation. "Actually, my business failed and the company went bankrupt." "Why did that happen?" Well, as John hesitated, Sarah indignantly pointed out, "He was having an affair and spent a fortune on that woman. That's why we're broke." According to Sarah, John had used the business funds to lavish money on his mistress, leading to the business's collapse. Unable to tell me directly, they hoped for Matt's financial support by inviting him and his family home. "It's all Dad's fault." "No, that's not." "How is it not your fault?" "Pushing your responsibility onto others. You and your son are the same." Sarah erupted and an argument ensued. As they began to quarrel, I quietly left the scene. Later on, John and Matt struggled to find re-employment, and with the rent deadline approaching, they reluctantly started working part-time in retail. However, Matt couldn't stand being instructed by younger part-timers and quit. John, mocked for his age in his 50s, lost the will to continue working. Ultimately, they ended up borrowing money from dubious lenders and were forced to work on a fishing boat to repay their debts. Now, they are reportedly working on crab fishing boats in the north. Meanwhile, Sarah, having given up on them, returned to her parents' house temporarily. However, debt collectors visited there too, so she's currently working night shifts. As for myself, I'm enjoying living alone, occasionally visiting my mother-in-law in the nursing home, and leading a fulfilling life. My mother-in-law sometimes asks about remarriage, but I'm not in that mindset yet. However, there's someone at the nursing home who has caught my attention. It seems my mother-in-law has noticed too, but for now, I wish to just watch how things unfold.